Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Tuesday night, which means only one thing nowadays, and that is it's time for the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast. You are here live tonight, along with myself, the Commish, Cyclop 2020. How are you guys doing tonight?
Beautiful.
Beautiful?
I've popped my beer open, so I'm ready to go tonight.
What kind of beer is that?
This is called Shotgun Betty. It's made by a local brewery called Lone Rider Brewery up here in Raleigh, North Carolina, home of the Wolf Pack, which is now, as I'll share, the home of my daughter going to college for the next 4 years. I know, Commish, you have one going to college too, to Rice, if I'm correct. The Owls. What was it? I know this is the Wolf Pack, right? This is the Bulls where we're from. What's the Owls? What do they do? Oh, I thought it was more probably like,
no, it's the chicken.
I wasn't sure.
No,
Cyclop, you should probably never do that again.
He's already a quarter of a beer in.
That's
so,
right.
You got to forgive the guy a little bit. No, the thing with the Wolfpack is when you're listening to those games when it's third down and they play that.
Yeah, it's cool at the stadium. Yeah, it's fun. Been to some games.
Sure.
And of course, now we're going to more, so I'm excited.
Enough about us, because we're here to talk about fantasy football. Last week, we talked about draft picks. We talked about where do we draft these picks, the people that were drafted, the rookies that were drafted the week before that. We talked about free agents and all the different moves. We talked about Julio Jones and how that's going to impact fantasy football. So before we start getting into each player, who to pick, when, what round, we decided that tonight we're going to talk about draft strategies. What do you think about? What are the things you know going into the draft that you're going to do or not going to do, or not have a strategy at all? Most people don't really have a strategy. They grab a cheat sheet on the internet and they just draft.
True.
And I guess that is a strategy. What about you guys? Do you have a favorite strategy?
So let me say this. First off, I know we'll regress for 1 second, but this is our third show in for the season. We're gonna have a long season. We're still in June. We got mini camps going, but this is our first show with the three of us together. We've had some family issues, some other issues, some whatever it is. So I'm glad that we're all together. I'm excited for tonight's show and to move forward.
Do you want to hug?
No, not from you. What I've realized, and as looking back at old drafts and strategies and this and that, I know we did a show last year about it too, is the strategy sometimes, like you said, is to have no strategy. There is a strategy, and then, like for instance, last year I changed mine literally the night of the draft, and I kind of made a decision and I went with it, and it was stupid as it turned out, but it could have worked out well. But my thought process is you have to continuously change your strategy, because as I'll show, I have some old draft boards that I've put on just from our league. And what I've noticed is over the years, you have some years that are running back heavy, and that's how it used to be. And then all of a sudden it got wide receiver heavy, and then it goes back to running back heavy. So there's a lot of different thought processes that go into drafting. So you have to really be on top of it. I understand the grab, the top players and whatnot, but you really have to be on top of it if you want to do well.
Okay, but before we move on and before we get Keith's ideas, Kenneth has given us a call. Our number one fan for the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast has given us a call, which, by the way, you all can do it as well by giving us a call, 772-800-2899. Give us a call. You can ask any questions. You can make any comments like Kenneth is probably about to do, or you can always just comment in the Facebook Live or YouTube Live section, and it'll come up, and we will be able to read it live on the air. Kenneth, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. I do have two questions. One is for your old producer, Belt Loop. I wonder how he is reacting to his beloved South Florida Bulls being beat by my Longhorns in the NCAA baseball super regionals this past weekend. And secondly, I came across a question on NFL Total Access that I'm interested to get y'all's thoughts on. Which QB is under the most pressure heading into this upcoming season?
Okay, so let's start with the first point. Unfortunately, Loopy can't make it tonight. He's working at his real job. But as a USF alum, and I know Brad is as well, I feel like I can answer this by saying just the fact that USF made it to the Super Regionals in the first place was big news for us.
Agreed.
Throughout the season, USF did not have a good team. We did not have a good record. We ended up winning the conference. Then we ended up getting past the regionals to the Super Regionals. And that was a miracle. We were definitely the bad news bears of the NCAA chase. But hey, Texas did a great job, and I wish them all the best going into the College World Series if they, at that point moving forward. And as far as which quarterback is under the most pressure, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
It's tough. If you had Trubisky that stayed in Chicago, that would be the obvious choice there. But it's interesting. I really want to think about it a little bit. My first thoughts on this might be Carson Wentz. Coming over to Indy, he did not look very good in Philly. Came over to Indy. He's got some tools there. I wouldn't say a ton of weapons, but I think he's going to have a short leash there to see if he can really perform. They gave a bit up to get him. I think he's probably. And my other thought was probably Big Ben, just to see if he could, bounce back and stay healthy, have a good year again before Pittsburgh starts thinking about looking at other quarterbacks in the draft. Just off the top of my head, those are probably the first two I'm thinking of.
So I have a couple different answers for this. So a lot of times hang on, Kenneth, you have a quarterback who wins the Super Bowl, and then you feel like they're going to have a lot of pressure to try to repeat and come back, right? But since it was Tom Brady, someone's getting some backfeed there. I'm not sure who. Anyway, since it's Tom Brady and he's won, 17 Super Bowls already, I think the pressure's off. So I'm going to go to our own hometown guy, Tua, going into his second season. Obviously, everyone's probably seen the reports already. Did not have a very good day today, but we'll kind of throw that out. And I'm willing to give him a pass on today. But I think he's under a lot of pressure, and I think that Kirk Cousins is under a lot of pressure in Minnesota.
I think Cousins had a very good year last year. He quietly always puts up really decent numbers.
Here's my thoughts here. First of all, I agree that Tua Tagovailoa is definitely under a lot of pressure. I think the Dolphins need to see whether or not he's going to be their quarterback of the future, and this is going to be the make it or break it year. As far as today's 5 interceptions in training camp, it means absolutely nothing. If you remember back in 2019, Jimmy Garoppolo had the same thing happen to him, 5 interceptions in training camp, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. Or I'm sorry, go to the Super Bowl. So I'm not concerned about that. If we're going to talk about pressure, definitely it's going to be under Tua. Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, is he going to be the guy moving forward with the Giants? But somebody else who nobody is mentioning, which I think is under a lot of pressure, and that's a guy that I actually like a lot, but that's Ryan Tannehill. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because he now has every tool possible, right? That's been the problem in the past. No line, no receivers, doesn't have a running back. Okay. Right now with that Julio Jones trade, they've got the line doing well. There's absolutely no reason for Ryan Tannehill not to succeed. And if he doesn't, to me, that's where there's the problem, and that's where there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. I mean, but he has been succeeding there in his own right. They're not a high-octane throwing offense. He can put up numbers, but they're a run-first team. But he has been doing well since he's been there. I think one other guy that's definitely under some pressure is Matt Ryan. He declined massively last year. They surprisingly didn't really go after a top-tier quarterback, and they had an opportunity to do it. So I think he's definitely under some pressure to bounce back and show that he can still be their guy.
So if you want to talk fantasy and pressure, right? If people are going to draft people for fantasy without looking, and I'm sure it's very easy. It's easy enough to take a quick look, as I already see, Seth, your eyes are going to the other monitor. Where did Ryan Tannehill finish last year as far as quarterbacks?
Oh no, I wasn't. I was looking to see if Kenneth was still on.
Oh.
I know. I got you.
I mean, do you have a guess?
Where did Ryan Tannehill finish? Probably around 12, 10 to 12.
I actually think I have him a little higher. I think he probably was closer to, like, believe it or not, maybe 7 or 8.
Yeah. So Tannehill, and every system's a little bit different based on points. He was the number 7 quarterback last year for fantasy. He averaged almost 22 points a game. He played all 16 games, 350 points. I mean, that's your top tier quarterbacks,
right?
Not your top; it's your second tier, but it's in your starters,
right?
So he, even with Derrick Henry running the balls 40, 45 times a game, he still produced fantasy wise enough. And then you add Julio Jones to the mix, and he's very interesting. I don't think Tannehill's under a ton of pressure. I'm going to disagree with you there. I mean, but that's my opinion.
That's fine. You're allowed to give your opinion. All right.
I'll drink to that.
All right, Kenneth. We appreciate the questions.
And I wanted to give.
You wanted to give.
Y'all still there? I wanted to give my take on it.
Okay, go ahead.
I say NFC wise, I gotta go with Dalton. He hasn't had a winning record since 2015. Because since 2015, he has not had a winning record. And with him being in Chicago, it's a winner else situation there. AFC wise, I gotta say Carson Wentz for pretty much the same reason. And basically, I come across 2 more that are definitely under pressure. What about Joe Burrow coming off an injury? The QB from Cincinnati. And I gotta agree with Tua.
All right.
Thanks for the assessment, Kenneth. No, we appreciate that. As far as Dalton, I don't think he's under any pressure. I mean, the guy's 35 years old. I don't think he's ever won a playoff game. I don't think he's under much pressure. He's going into Chicago and, to see what he can do there. Actually, I think he's going to do fine there. I think they have good receivers. I think it'll be a simple offense, and he'll do fine.
Are you drafting him as a QB too?
Absolutely not. But as a QB2, maybe.
Maybe QB3. I agree with you. I don't think there's any pressure on Dalton. He knows that he's really not the guy there. He knows they drafted Justin Fields, knows what the situation is.
Right.
But interestingly enough, who I also think is going to have a lot of pressure on him is Justin Herbert. Because in his first year, he did so well. We all know about that sophomore curse. It is a real thing. It happened to Baker Mayfield. It happened with who else was it? It happened with Lamar Jackson after he had that great year. He had a regression. You start pressing. It didn't happen with Pat Mahomes, but you start pressing a little bit in your second year. You want to repeat how good you were in that first year, and very often it's self-induced pressure because you did so good as a rookie. There's not a lot of expectation on you. It's a lot easier to operate and work in that environment where there's no expectation. But once you've produced and you're still a young quarterback, that's why they have that sophomore regression. So I think Herbert's going to have a lot of pressure on him. A lot of it's self-induced. Again, this is a young quarterback who came out slinging, just like Burrow did before he got hurt. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure there as well. I think you might see a little regression with Herbert.
Yeah, but both Burrow and Herbert could fail, and it won't make a difference. They're not going to go ahead and draft somebody else. They're not going to be concerned because of the success they had previously. And then just say it's a sophomore slump. But
You're right. In the terms of pressure, the pressure is losing your job, and that's usually how we use that terminology. I agree. They're not in under quarterback pressure of losing their job. It was more
Burrow will be under the most pressure by defenses. There's no doubt about that.
He'll have Chase to throw the ball, but not Sewell to protect him. That's still scratching my head over that after that draft.
Yes. All right. So let's get back to draft strategies. I know, Brad, you said it's a moving target, so to speak. Keith, do you have any quick thoughts on draft strategies before we start?
Yeah, I agree. It's very similar. First of all, it depends on the league. If you're a league where you're in a flex league, I mean, quite honestly, it's very vanilla, garden variety, traditional. But if you can start two running backs in a flex, I'm always going to go running back heavy. I'm probably not going to change that philosophy. Running backs typically put their hands on the ball 20 times a game. Receivers are going to get, on a good day, 6, 7, 8, 9 catches. So if you're in a flex league, for me, I'm always going to look to stack running backs because I want 60 touches a week from those 3 guys. So a lot of it depends on the league. But like Cyclop was saying, you got to be fluid. You go in with the strategy. You might be thinking, I want to stack my running backs, and all of a sudden a great receiver staring you in the face. Very similar to NFL drafts. You want to have a game plan, knowing your teams that you're playing against, knowing your buddies, because usually we're in leagues with our buddies, kind of understanding and knowing some of their drafting, methodologies and what you want to do, but you've got to be ready to pivot. My favorite Friends episode.
Brad, pivot. Brad, do you have the draft board from 2 years ago when we were in New Orleans? Do you have that picture up there?
I don't think one of these is that picture. It might be. Actually, it might be.
Yes,
this one. It's this one. All right. So let me just say, we know that 2020 likes to draft people who are going to have their hands on their balls the most, but the problem is
really. Seriously?
Well, no, I mean, this is a great example of having to pivot because I want to show you, because I agree with Keith with regard to running backs. Running backs are a very important position in fantasy. Everybody knows that, and they're usually all gone. I had the misfortune of being the last pick in the draft for this year that you see on the screen. And of course, I went in with the strategy of I'm grabbing 2 running backs. That was my strategy going in. What happens is it gets to the last pick, and you'll see in the last column, all the running backs are gone except Mixon, Dalvin Cook. Now, remember, this isn't the same Dalvin Cook that we saw last year. So they wouldn't have those kind of expectations. Cook actually had an incredible year. And Brad, I think you took advantage.
I think that was Cook's rookie year.
No, it was not.
Years ago.
I got hurt his rookie
3 years ago. Oh
no,
it was not. The point is, Cook had a really good year, and then he was drafted high the next year. But the point is here, you see all of the running backs were taken, and it came down to me, and I had the choice of either grabbing somebody like Joe Mixon, who I was not high on, Dalvin Cook, who was coming off of an injury, or getting the number 1 and number 2 receivers that were available. So I grabbed the number 1 and number 2 receivers that were available. The problem is when we came back around the 3rd and 4th round, there was nothing left. There were no running backs. I get Kerryon Johnson and Josh Jacobs. There were no other running backs available at that time and as a result, it was a very difficult year for me because I was chasing running backs the entire year.
Exactly.
So
look how interesting this draft is, though. Derrick Henry in the 3rd round, Aaron Jones in the 3rd round, Josh Jacobs in the 3rd round, or 4th round, actually. Excuse me, these guys. How interesting.
Yeah, after I was done with the draft this year, like McCaffrey, Cook, Cooper, Galladay, Hill. I mean, I loved this draft, and it's something for some reason similar to happens. I end up starting off slow and then coming back later in the year. I believe I made the playoffs this year, but I didn't win the league because I haven't won it in a long time, unfortunately. But I loved my team at the end of this year.
Now,
at the end of this draft.
I think Mike won it that year.
Yes, you're right. Mike won it.
And he had the number 1 pick. He gets Barkley, who gets hurt.
Right.
Partially way through. but he made a lot of good moves throughout the season, I should say, to supplement his team. So this is another good example of you could draft a great team. You had a really good draft, Brad, but
Right.
sometimes things just don't fall the way you want them to fall.
So let me take this draft down and show you. There's so many. Like, one of the strategies that I think of, and it just becomes more and more apparent. So this is our draft from last year. Okay, I know it's a little bit hard to see. I didn't have a great picture to zoom in. It got fuzzy when I zoomed in. But now Dan won our league last year. And if you look at his team,
what column is he in?
I believe he's 9. I believe.
Okay. Yeah. He's the 9th. He's in the 9th column.
Okay. His strategy last year was like, let me draft the worst possible team and see what happens out of the 10. I was looking over all the teams at the end of the draft. And sorry, Dan, but you look at this team from last year, and you never would have thought that he would have won the league.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
So you just don't know. There's so much to be said between the 3rd and the 8th round, looking for steals. Like, I look at my draft from last year. I was, looking over drafts today to go over draft strategy and all this. And Stephon Diggs, I believe it was in the 6th round. I was the number 1 pick. Now, I lost McCaffrey. Miles Sanders didn't play great. And then I took Jackson, which was, on the turn of the 2nd and 3rd round. So, you can say a 2nd round, 3rd round, whatever. That ended up being a mistake. And that's where I faltered in the draft. But I got this Stephon Diggs, who no one really thought was going to have a huge year, because Josh Allen, coming off the year before, was not that throwing quarterback, right? He was more running. So
we were so down on him.
And a lot of people were down on him, yeah. And Diggs ended up being the number 2, I believe, wide receiver for the year. Maybe it was 3. I don't remember exactly. 3 overall. Now, that's where I ended up, for myself, winning the draft, right? In that mid-range there. So, I've been playing fantasy football a long time, but you really got to look for those steals in those middle rounds that are still starters, to try to take care of any injuries like McCaffrey, injuries like these other players that, you look at the draft last year, McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, and Elliott still ended up decent for the year, but really didn't have a good year, not as far as a 1st round pick, right? Yeah. I think I counted 5 of the top 10 picks really were, I don't want to say bust, but they were injured or didn't end up being great.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take a look at the 3rd column, which was my draft. And I ended up going to the Super Bowl. I lost in the championship game to Dan. But during that game, I only had 1 guy that I drafted on my roster. 1. And that was Chris Carson. Everyone else was either traded away, hurt, and dropped. Hold on 1 second.
That's amazing.
Hey, Kenneth.
Hey, I'd like to offer my strategy in regards to drafting. And my strategy,
Fantasy Buzz.
I would wait until probably after like training camp or something to draft, because if you draft ahead of training camp, you might come across someone that might get injured.
You're absolutely right, and that
could change up your original plan. So I would wait until after training camp to have a draft, because if you wait, like I said, if you wait beforehand, somebody might get hurt, and that could throw a proverbial wrench into your strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be interesting to find out from Mike at the draftkit.com, when does he get most of his business? When does he have the highest volume? Do people normally wait until the end of preseason, and thank you for the call, Kenneth. The people will usually wait till the end of preseason like we do in our leagues, most of our leagues, or do you do it early? And there's a lot of people who are excited, right? They want to do the draft now, just so they can get it over with because they're very excited. They're bored, so to speak.
I'd almost
We've actually had many of our drafts on opening night of football.
Day, right?
We've literally 3 or 4 times, I think, have had, and one time we actually had our draft after the first game, and just factored that in because we like to take it to the end for exactly the reasons that you just said.
I'd almost like to do. I know we do that in our league, and we've always done that, and that's great. But there's a lot of teams that draft now, and I don't think it throws that wrench into anything. I think really what it does is create more trades during camp or more ad drops or whatever the case may be. It's just different. It's not necessarily part of your strategy. It's just different. Like right now, if you drafted today, what do you do with Aaron Rodgers? What do you do with, some of these players? That would change, obviously, if people sign. But that's just all part of it. Dynasty leagues, they're going all year. Things are happening. They're drafting rookies. They're making trades in the offseason. If they have Burrow, and then all of a sudden they can draft a rookie, whatever quarterback, just came out, so they're trading, they're doing things. It's just adding to the aspect of the league. And I would almost really love to do a draft.
That echo back?
Everyone's getting feedback. Is that you, 2020?
Might be.
I would almost at one time love to do a draft now, like when mini camps get going, and then kind of play that out and also do a draft then. So you almost have like 2 teams with the same people. But just to see how it is to have that action going on during preseason. Of course, last year there was no preseason, so it didn't matter.
So I'll tell you what I did. When you brought up the idea, the topic of draft strategies, I decided to go ahead and do a few mocks based on different strategies, just to see where, based on average draft position and on experts, what we would do. And the first strategy I did, which is one that my nephew Jonathan and my brother David had done, which is the no RBs. Wait until you fill out your roster, then you can grab the running backs later. So I tried that, and this was what I got. I ended up. We'll do it. Let me show you first. I did it as just random as the 5th pick. So I ended up with Tyreek and Diggs as my first 2 picks, then Mahomes, then Godwin, then Hawkinson. So once I had my 3 receivers, my quarterback, and my tight end, I said, okay, now I can start getting running backs. So I end up with Sanders, Kareem Hunt, and Chase Edmonds as my running backs. And then, of course, just filled in the roster afterwards. And the experts thought that was good enough for a B+.
Well, I don't understand the filling in your running backs. I don't understand. Was that every team?
The idea was to wait. No, just me. So
okay, I understand.
I waited to pick running backs until after I filled in my other skill positions.
Okay.
And so that worked out in this virtual sense. It worked out, but I don't think I could do that. If you look at this guy who did the 4th pick, he grabbed Devontae Adams, then Hopkins, then Allen Robinson, and still was able to get Gibson, Swift, Gaskin, James Robinson. I mean, it looks like they're in this coming year, there might be running backs, and we'll get into that in a few, in the next month or 2. Available.
Sorry, I switched this off. We've had people in the past, and I'd have to look through. I don't know if it's any of these that have done like wide receiver.
Yeah, in this one, we actually go back to the one you were just on. The 6th pick.
Yep, wide receiver.
Right, and then the 2 running.
Actually, one year, not only did Jeff go wide receiver, he picked 2 receivers on the same team. He picked Wes Welker and Randy Moss back to back. That's when they went ballistic, and he actually had a decent year.
Can you go to this past year? I think Jeff, did he get 2 receivers? No, he didn't. Okay. Oh no, he did. He got receiver and then quarterback.
Right. Yeah, he team 10. He always is team 10, right? So he went receiver, quarterback, running back, then wide receiver again.
Right.
So the first four, 3 of the first 4 picks were not running back.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the next strategy I did,
And he had a really good year.
Yeah, he did. He also did a lot of free agent moves.
Mm-hmm.
The next strategy I did was not to pick a quarterback until after all of my other positions were filled in, including defense and kicker. All right. So in this case, team 5, Saquon, then Diggs and Keenan Allen, DeAndre. And I went all the way down, got my defense, even got Justin Tucker. Then I picked quarterback, and look who was there, Russell Wilson. I could have, at that point, I could have also gotten Herbert. I could have gotten Brady. I could have gotten Jalen Hurts. So not that I would ever pick a defense or a kicker before a quarterback, but you see that there were quarterbacks available, and the experts said, no, don't do that. Don't wait. Now, I think it's more than just the quarterback because Wilson is a legitimate fantasy QB1.
Wilson was the number 6 overall QB last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in this case, it was less about that strategy and more about the picks that were being suggested by the experts. And then the final strategy was don't pick a wide receiver until after the second round. So it's not necessarily running back, but it's hold off on the wide receivers. So team 5 again, Kamara and Akers. Then I came back and grabbed Michael Thomas and Mike Evans. I waited on the receivers no matter who was available. And they liked it. They thought that that was a good idea. And again, how much of it is based on the strategy and how much of it is based on, who my bench players are or anything like that.
Were you actually doing this draft or was this
No, what I did was on Fantasy Pros, they give you suggestions based on the experts and what you need to pick. And I just kept hitting it without thinking. I had zero thought. And I just kept picking whatever the top suggestion was.
Kind of like 2020 does in our draft.
Correct.
Wait, what do I do in our draft?
Wait, what? Exactly.
So, it's interesting. I was looking at kind of the story between the two draft boards you put up. Cyclop, throw up the New Orleans one again if you have that easy, because I did something. You and I have very similar strategies. We never jump on quarterbacks early. I always find that there's a good 8, 9, or 10 out there that are starting worthy. But I was very enamored, obviously, with Pat Mahomes, as a lot of people were. And as you could see here, and I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th guy in. And in the second round, I pounced early on Mahomes. We do team quarterbacks. So it's Kansas City team quarterback to see there.
Not anymore.
And I got to tell you, it hurt me.
It hurt you. What hurt you was your running backs. And that was your running backs. Not having the good running backs is what hurt you that year.
Yes, not having the good running. Sony Michel, he looked like he was going to come in and really be the guy. He wasn't. Damian Williams looked like he had a great postseason before he was hurt a lot. Melvin Gordon was on a holdout, and he ended up holding out Brady. Yeah, and getting Mahomes early, those running backs hurt to begin with. Usually that would offset. He would if it was the Pat Mahomes that could just overperform. It would have made up for some of the lackluster and Michelle not performing, but it killed me. Now go back to this last year's draft and what I would normally do and wait on quarterbacks, which is what I did. And I was heavy on the running backs, getting Kamara and Jacobs, and then even getting Taylor and Swift, who really came on. The issue was Matt Ryan started off the year actually very strong, but then he just absolutely sunk. Very atypical for Matty Ice. And I had to luckily I had enough running backs I was able to trade for Herbert. But I went back to my strategy of stacking those running backs again and just waiting. And you can see that's what a lot of our league does. Look at all of these quarterbacks that were going in these mid rounds over here.
Well, back to your comment, and I'm going back to the other draft where you had picked Mahomes early. And this is something, and this is not a personal dig by any stretch of the imagination, but in retrospect, and you look back at this, you can learn a lot. And that year, there were not a lot of good running backs available. And that's something that you have to keep in mind is if you're assuming that all of your RB1 and RB2 types are going to be gone, you might have to shift your strategy at that point to maybe not get Mahomes, as in this case, as enamored as you are, knowing that the only running backs that were really worthy after the second round, or even after your pick, were going to be Mixon and Cook, possibly Fournette. There really was nobody else that was worthy. And so it got to that point, and this should have been the thought I had too before grabbing those two wide receivers, was knowing what was going to be available when I came back around in the third round. And that's when you got to shift. That's when you've got to look and say, you know what, I think I need to go with my running backs, even though the top receiver or the top quarterback is available, because what's going to happen later.
Yeah, this was a very atypical year for me. I never take quarterbacks this early. Yeah, you were right. I was just enamored with him, and I really bought into the hype on Sony Michel, and Damian Williams was tremendous towards the end of the previous year, and they didn't bring in anybody at running back, so it looked like he'd be the guy, and he was just injured, and Michel didn't pan out. So yeah, it killed me, and it was like I said, this is very atypical to go quarterback that early. And
what's funny? 2020 is, you're right. We both have always had very similar strategies on quarterback, and you did it that year, and I did it the next year with Jackson, and it killed me.
You weekly paid for it. Yep.
I paid for it by jumping up and getting him, and it's frustrating, and you want to have fun, and sometimes there's definitely some very easy things to say about strategy, right? At least come to the draft sober, right? And maybe focused, a good night's sleep, right? At least get there sober. Make sure you have some type of idea what you want to do in the first couple picks, and then see what falls. But really what I started doing was really going to the third, fourth, fifth rounds and making a list of players, maybe even like 10 deep that I want in those rounds, because then I can start formulating my team. The first couple of picks, you kind of know, right? You have 20 picks. You basically, for the most part, know who's going to be available. So those are the easy ones for the most part, even though sometimes it's hard to decide. Did you want McCaffrey or Barkley or Elliott, whatever it is in the top 4 running backs. But then in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, you really have to have an idea of what you want to do.
Well, and again, like you were saying, we're always going to want to take the next possible best player available and rounding out your team. But like the Commish was talking about a few moments ago, and that year I took Mahomes, it was a leaner year at running back. So one definite strategy going in to your draft is understanding the field at each position. For example, for 2021, this is by far one of the most balanced years I've seen in a very long time. And what I mean by that is, quite honestly, there's a lot more running backs out there that are RB1s and strong RB2s than I've seen in a long time. A couple backfields got muddled because they brought in other guys that took away a bell cow situation, but there's a lot of RB1s and RB2s. And I think certainly more than last year, where the wide receiver situation is so weird. We didn't know what Michael Thomas, that he was going to end up that way. OBJ, it's like, which OBJ is it? Now there's a lot of clarity, and there's more potent wide receivers with the emergence of Jefferson and Ayuk and all of these guys that came out and just studs. There's a lot more studs right now. And now I really feel like there is 10 really good, decent starting QB1s out there that you could have. So it's one of the most balanced fields that I've seen, but you want to look at it and see if there's a weakness anywhere. devise your strength. Well, it might be a little weaker at RB1, and that's what you have to hit early. So know the field each year, where there's weaknesses, where there's bounties, and you have to draft towards that.
All right. So if you guys want to have a little fun, I have a suggestion. One of the strategies that somebody was just playing around with was not drafting anybody whose last name started anywhere between M and Z. So you can only draft players from A to L, right? So,
Okay.
all right. So what we're going to do is I've got the mock draft simulator up. All right. And what we're going to do
Obviously,
here.
last name, of course.
Yeah, last name. We'll make it full screen here. And let's go with a PPR or half PPR.
PPR.
PPR. Randomize the draft position 6. And we'll do, oops. Okay, start your draft.
This is like baseball. It's like AL only or NL only.
All right, so Derrick Henry's first. Henry. Devontae. Nope, we can't do Michael Thomas, but we'll do A.J. Brown. Amari Cooper.
A.J. Brown? What?
We can't do Kyler.
Wait, this isn't. Wait, how is this?
This is the whole draft. This is the whole draft. I see what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then Mark Andrews we can do. Mike Davis we can do. Robbie Anderson. Melvin Gordon. Jalen Hurts. Let's take a look at our team so far. Our quarterback is Jalen Hurts. We're in trouble. We have Derrick Henry, Chris Carson, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, and Mark Andrews, and some bench players. Okay, so we can't get Tannehill, but we can do
I can't believe they have Tannehill in front or behind Hurts.
Hurts, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up. So he is they're listing as 70th best. So if we go to our cheat sheet here, they have Hurts at 10, Ryan Tannehill at 11. Right. And again, this is based on a composite of experts. All right, so we have to skip Tannehill, go to Fant. We can't do Williams. We can do T.Y. Tariq Cohen. I didn't even know he was still in the league. The Colts we can do. And the kicker we can do Will Lutz. And we get a B.
All right, not bad.
Not bad.
Well, you got Henry and Carson.
Right. You just
and Adams, who knows who's going to be throwing to him.
Now, realistically, I don't see this draft working out this way. I don't see Derrick Henry dropping to 6 in the draft. I see Henry being drafted, and we'll get into this later on in the summer, but I see Henry definitely being drafted later on. Before Barkley,
earlier,
possibly even before Kamara. Right. So yeah, I just thought that, if you have strategies, you can go on to Fantasy Pros and do the mock draft simulator. In fact, they even have you can choose your strategy in Fantasy Pros. So let me take.
So the question is, let's say out there or in our league, who's got the balls to take that strategy and do it in the draft?
Nobody.
An actual draft.
Not me. I can tell you that much.
I think you're the man for the job there, Cyclop.
We'll see.
Yeah, so you can do simulation for just running backs, but or no quarterbacks until after you have your receivers and your running backs. But again, it has to be fluid. But if you're going to have a fluid strategy, you really need to know what's going on with the other players and what you think might be available later.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to look at. That's why the draft board is such a key component and keeping a track of the draft. And of course, these days we have the draft kit that we do it with, and we also have, you can do it online. It's easy enough to keep track these days of what other teams have and what they might be taking. Not that it always works out perfect, but at least you get ideas and you can draft based on that.
There's some really good softwares out there. I use one called Draft Dominator, and it's not so much I like their suggestions. I love the organization of it. It gives you great information, not just projections, but previous stats right there. I mean, very similar to what you're going to see online in the draft, whatever draft website you're using. But it's really inexpensive, and it's a great drafting tool.
Yeah, and I use that as well, and so do a few other people in our league, and you obviously only one person can win, and so no matter who's using the Dominator or what software you're using, I go back to the fact that I only had one player left on my team that I had drafted, and I had done, as you know, so much draft research, knowing everything going in, who different strategies, looking at projections across the entire season, and you don't know what's going to happen throughout the year. You don't know that Julio Jones is going to be hurt for 3/4 of the season. You don't know that Antonio Gibson will end up being an RB1. Things like that you can make the best draft possible, and it may not matter in the end. Brad's team from a few years ago looked like, a juggernaut. Who was going to beat Brad? I think it just shows that the draft is just a small part of the entire.
Of course, but a big part, right?
Yes.
Like it's we all look forward to that day, that night, whatever it may be, getting together, whatever the scenario might be. We all are excited. It's like for that draft, right?
Yes.
It's true. You know what? And I love what you were talking about, Seth, because look, we want to think that we could do an enormous amount of research, look at strength of schedule and offensive lines and how good or bad is the defense and how much do they throw, and do everything we possibly can to put our best analysis foot forward to make the best possible picks that we can. But there's something that cannot be denied, that this is absolutely a huge element of fantasy football, and we don't like to say it and nobody speaks it, but there is luck. Absolutely, positively, both good and bad. For example, your team went to the Super Bowl and you all had all but one player that was on your draft, or from whom you drafted. That's fantasy football. We want to think we can be as smart as we can and be as finessey as we can, but a lot of this comes down to pure bad and or good luck. But you still got to put your best foot forward and roll with it.
So we have had a request for trivia on our comments. It's not coming through as who it is, but actually Jeff Sponder was on, and then someone put trivia, and I don't know who that was. And I don't know if you have a trivia question for tonight, Commish. I'm not sure.
No, I didn't prepare it for tonight.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize we would have a fan request for trivia. Otherwise,
I have a trivia question. What is the first rap song to go number one?
Ice
this
Baby.
Is a non-football question.
They said trivia. No one said fantasy.
All right.
First thing that came to my head. First rap song to go number one.
To go number one, would it
Ice
be?
Ice Baby.
Yep, Cyclop got it. It is Ice Ice. It is not Rapper's Delight. It is Ice Ice Baby.
Yes. Okay, well look.
So I have a question. It's not a trivia question, but it is a question. The question is, instead, like last year we had the COVID experience, right? And we started talking early about, is there going to be a football season, and what is the percentage? Commish, you kept going up a little bit each week, and you started really low and whatever. So this year I thought it'd be fun if we have the Aaron Rodgers experience, right? The Aaron Rodgers question. Like, what are the odds that he plays for Green Bay again? I'll start it off. I'm going with 20% right now that he will be in a Green Bay uniform come this season.
That's low. I mean, that's going with what the media is saying. I just, I look at his longevity there. A 13-3 team, perennially going for the Super Bowl. To me, I'm going a little higher. I'm going as high as 50% that there. And I know what he said, and I know I've been reading all the stories as well. They came up with an offer to extend it. I'm going 50% though. I think there is a chance that they reconcile.
What do you think, Commish?
I don't have a number, but I will tell you that I do believe that it is actually higher than 50%. I find it hard to think. I mean, he is Green Bay, and one way or another, I think they're going to figure that out. I find it really difficult to think that he would. This is not like what happened with Le'Veon Bell. This is completely different, because he is the team. And I don't know if they think Love is really the true answer in Green Bay, or are they going to just waste a year? But I think it's higher. I think it's going to be higher than 50%.
And he's got so much football left in him. I mean, this is the MVP. He's just got so much left in him.
Agreed. Just some of the things that I've seen him doing, and how he's acting, and how he is almost coming out and saying, I'm not playing, basically coming out and saying, I'm not playing there anymore. I just went low. I think it's low. I think at some point the arm will get twisted and they'll have to essentially trade him if they want to do anything with him, or just let him sit out. But I'm not finding a middle ground that they're going to get to at the moment. But we'll see what happens.
I'm going to piggyback that question. Same question on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, no, that's a little
different question. Go ahead, Commish.
No, I that's a little different. I don't see them. I think that they did everything they could to build their roster around Watson, not meaning that they're getting other skill positions, but meaning they have other quarterbacks ready to step in. Obviously not to the caliber that Watson was, but I think that they're prepared to go the season without him. And I think it's going to come down to the legal battle and see what's happening on that front. I'm sure every day they're trying to figure out where they stand legally with regard to Watson. And also look from a PR standpoint, right? I know they're just accusations, but they're going to be looked at as the organization that will allow somebody who's been accused of all of these terrible things to play. So I think that if we're going to have a percentage on that, I think it's probably going to be around 20%.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, right around that same number, maybe even a little bit less. I don't think Deshaun Watson puts on a Texans jersey again. There's a lot of links to him going to Denver. That DB that he played with over at Houston is there. And legal battles aside, I think that ship has sailed. And I really don't see him wearing a Texans. And he's definitely going to serve some time in suspension with the league as well. But I think his days in Houston are done.
All right.
I would agree with that. Go ahead.
I have an interesting trivia question that nobody's going to get, but okay. And I found this one on well, I don't want to say where because then they'll look up the answer. But so the Steelers, they used their first round draft pick to pick Najee Harris, the running back that we were all hoping Miami would grab. And if that name Harris sounds familiar for Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it's because they had Franco Harris back in the 70s, Hall of Famer. And Franco Harris had over 8 seasons with over 1,000 yards rushing. And we don't know whether or not Najee Harris will rush over 1,000 yards, but here's the question. There's only 2 teams in the last 20 years that have had 2 players with the same last name both run over 1,000 yards in a season. Any ideas at all?
In the past 20 years.
Yes.
And they've had both same last names.
They both had the same last name and both ran for over 1,000 yards. And I will tell you that there's a few over 20 years, but if we're just looking at 20 years, there's only been 2. And then after a little further back, you actually have 3, including our Miami Dolphins.
Interesting.
So are we looking for the teams?
You can give me the teams, but if you can figure out the running backs, you're going to get it either way.
So would Arizona be one?
Arizona is not one of them. Who are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking maybe David Johnson and then maybe another Johnson.
Oh, I got you.
There.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
And then another
Chris Johnson, but he didn't do 1,000.
Another one I'm thinking is the Raiders.
It is not the Raiders.
Not the Raiders. Okay.
All right. So.
Oh, wait a minute. I know one. Denver Broncos, Terrell Davis and Mike Davis.
You're so funny. You know, it is the Broncos, but that's not the right answer.
Oh, okay then.
Mike Davis did not rush for over 1,000 yards with Denver. It has to be on the same team.
Got it.
So, but I will tell you in Denver, it was Mike Anderson and CJ Anderson. Both with over 1,000 yards.
Would never have guessed that. Oh, that's right. Mike Anderson, not Mike Davis in Denver. He backed up Terrell Davis. Yeah.
That's
Mike
right.
Davis from North Carolina.
So no idea on the Dolphin running backs?
I'm thinking it's a Williams.
That's
Ricky,
correct.
Ricky, but I'm
so Ricky and
Delvin.
1979.
Delvin Williams.
Delvin Williams. So Ricky Williams, Delvin Williams, but that's after 20 years.
That's the third one, right?
So I'll tell you the other teams, and we got that go again, and you can tell me the players. So the team is Tennessee. Can you think of the two players?
I'm thinking Chris Johnson is one.
Nope.
What about not Chris Johnson, but
And it's Tennessee, not before when they were Houston, right? It's
Correct.
past the Titans.
Well, it's Eddie George. No,
Nope.
but it's not. He wouldn't have been.
Nope.
And then there was the past 20 years, two same last names. Don't know.
The answer is Derrick Henry and Travis Henry.
Travis Henry. I'm literally looking at Derrick Henry's name, but I couldn't come up with the other Henry.
It's
Henry.
people that are so important at a given time just disappear out of our minds. The other ones that are past 20 years that are a little more obscure would be the Bengals with Rudy and Pete Johnson. Remember Pete Johnson? He was like a bulldozer. And then the Browns had Greg Pruitt and Mike Pruitt, and that was it. So I thought that was
that is very interesting trivia.
And Pruitt played for the Dolphins at one point.
If you're looking at the Titans franchise, you had Gary Brown and Chris Brown, but we were saying strictly in the with Tennessee.
Right.
Nice trivia question. Very nice.
All right. So are we moving on? Let's say that our next show, we're going to start really looking at some of these players, right? We talked about tonight, we started to touch on, hey, are you going to pick Tannehill before you pick someone like Jalen Hurts? That's the kind of stuff that we're going to start getting into next week. And of course, your feedback is very important. If you have a topic, if you have a question, if there's something that's burning you want to know about, go ahead and email us or make a comment in Facebook Live or YouTube Live. Go onto our Facebook page at Fantasy Buzz Podcast, and we would love to hear from you guys. Any parting words, Brad, Keith?
I just want to say when Commish says burning and, if you have questions about it, it's strictly fantasy-wise, not, fantasy football-wise.
Anything. No,
we'll answer anything. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You're having troubles at home.
You're
Whatever.
right.
We'll work on it.
We did start off as the fantasy doctors, right?
Correct.
Years and years ago.
Hey, we're versatile.
Anyway, I'm glad we were together. It was our first show together. Looking forward to this season. Let's make it a fun one.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right, guys.